Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Beetlejuice from 1988. Beetlejuice was a major film in pop culture in the 80s because of the cartoon show. I've probably watched this film a ton of times. I watched it a lot and hadn't watched it in a long time. And it was interesting coming to terms with that. And I've seen people on Twitter talking about this movie and sort of realizing, whoa, I didn't know Beetlejuice was that creepy. So it's less that people are so woke nowadays, and it's more like, whoa, I didn't realize what this was, I think, to be honest with you. But at the same time, this is a weird movie to review because it is not necessarily straightforward. It is not structured very well. It does not necessarily make a lot of sense that this works and was such a pop culture thing, but I think in a sense that was sort of the point, and I think it works because it's such a good romp of a time that you sort of just go with it. Now, when I look at Beetlejuice and you look at the actual IP mass marketability that this property became after this movie, you also have to look at why it was developed. And why it was developed from the writer Michael McDowell. They're trying to make more supernatural type comedy hits like Ghostbusters. This was at Universal. And it eventually turned around and it became Beetlejuice with Tim Burton at Warner's. But if you look at this film, I think it shares some similarities with Ghostbusters. Now, one of the big ones in my mind is that Ghostbusters, if you watch that movie, or it's been a while, that film is basically held together with Scotch tape. It is a lot of missing pieces. It's like I don't know how it works. Structure-wise, it makes no fucking sense. You're just sitting there like wait, this is from there, this happens then. Structure-wise, what's the meaning of this? It's all a jumble of pieces, and somehow it works in the editing room. I think this film, and I know there's documentaries and stuff about how it was made. I didn't look into all of that. Is similar in that there's sketches, it's named after a guy who's barely in it. You have Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin. You have this weird thing on the art world with Lydia Dietz's parents. You have a young Winona Ryder. You have Tim Burton launching. This is really the first film we're seeing with his style in it, and it's all coming together. But what is Beetlejuice about? What's the real theme of it? I don't, is it about the afterlife? Is it about moving on? Is it about dealing with your own neuroses? I don't know. Who the fuck cares? This movie's fun. Do I care why Ghostbusters is successful? No. And nobody's figured it out anyway, so shut up. The point is, in all seriousness, other than the first Men in Black, nobody has been able to replicate that movie, and I think Beetlejuice is a similar thing. You had enough talent on screen in this movie. This bullshit somehow worked. It is like a miracle of the 80s. You look at this, you look at Beverly Hills Cop, and you look at Ghostbusters, and it's you're watching it and you're like, I don't know how you thought this was a movie, but it also really works. What the fuck happened, and why do I like this so much? Now, this movie is about this married couple, Barbara and Adam, played by Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, are in their house, this new house that they've made. Everyone wants them to sell it. They die in a car accident. They come back as ghosts and stuff, and then they're dealing with the afterlife, and the Dietzes move in. They're kind of this rich, arty couple who likes doing crazy 80s interior design with their daughter, although Catherine O'Hara, who plays one of the Dietzes, is her stepmother or whatever, Winona Ryder, and she's kind of gothy and spooky. She can see the Dietzes. They're trying to deal with having to, spook the Dietzes out of the house, and so they get a kind of a human exterminator played by Beetlejuice, but of course he is evil and seriously is a sexual predator and stuff, and wants to marry Lydia so that he can come to Earth and do, I don't know, but marrying, having a child bride is weird, so let's just assume he wasn't going to do anything great. So it kind of becomes this whole comedic romp, and they do Deo and all that stuff. This is early in Tim Burton's career, and I think this is sort of similar to a previous early film he did, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Pee-wee's Big Adventure is just sort of a road movie. You're just going from thing to thing to thing, but it works really well. It is sort of like a series of sketches and ideas and moments, but there's sort of a framework together that it generally works. This has a similar thing to Pee-wee's Big Adventure, where it does feel like all these like various things, and I don't think it has as much of a through line as Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I think Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a better movie, but I still think this is a good movie actually. But I think it works in all of having all these various ideas, but I think because it's so loose, and maybe intentionally, because at this time it's 1988, the real Ghostbusters cartoon was launched, there were so much mass marketability, and the fact that this was eventually developed to sort of be something like that, and then sort of became the other mass market movie that became a cartoon show, that a video game and birthday parties and all that stuff. It is interesting that it did that similar thing. I do think also it goes into, similar to Ghostbusters, Bill Murray is very much playing Cary Grant. I think Michael Keaton is playing one of those big star roles. I read in Pauline Kael's review of this, she mentions the Cary Grant movie Hopper. I think that's how you say it. That film reminds me sort of those kind of star-driven, star performance kind of films, and like you're really seeing it for all the people and the actors in it. You're not really seeing it for the plot, and I think Beetlejuice, much like like Bill Murray has been very open that he used Cary Grant. That's not just a pet theory I have, by the way. And I think in this, it's a similar thing. Like, you watch a Cary Grant movie, you're watching it for fucking Cary Grant. You're not watching it. There are ones that have stories. You don't need to say, what about this one? But there are a lot of his like sort of star vehicles. And in a sense, like, I think Tim Burton did that, but there's no, like, Beetlejuice isn't in it enough. Winona Ryder isn't, like, none of them are the star vehicle of this star vehicle, but it's sort of like a showcase of all their talents, and all of them wanted to. I think it's an amazing cast. Like, I love seeing everyone from Gary Shaddix to Catherine O'Hara to Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice is amazing. But it really is like, feels like this breath of originality, fresh air, but it's like set in a way that it like lets all that shine, because it isn't hampered down by as much plot. It's interesting when you think of Tim Burton as a filmmaker. I feel like eventually when we get to him now, he's very much a storyteller. And in this, he's so much more of a stylist. But the funny thing is when we think of him now, we think of him more as a stylist, probably because he's like, in these big budget things, like the story's kind of, he's not a great storyteller. But in this, it's like, I think I like him more as just a stylist in this mode, because it feels so like organic and weird and different, especially in the 80s. Like, it's like such a different sort of thing, and why his explosion and his style was fucking everywhere and influencing everything. I everyone talks about how Batman launched him to be a huge director, but this sort of launched the auteur of Burton. In a lot, it did. I do think, like, reading about the development, like, Tim Burton developed the cartoon show, like, this was developed to be a Ghostbusters thing. There might have been like more of a behind the scenes plan to like launch a new franchise in a way. That sounds actually kind of novel nowadays, to be honest. But it might seem a lot more cynical as well. That doesn't make me dislike this movie in any way. I was surprised, like, I didn't love it as much, but I also have seen it so many times. I knew every line and every movement and every frame. So I almost felt like it was sort of wasn't going to film this, and I was having trouble kind of figuring out what to say about it. And it was shocking to see, like, wow, Beetlejuice's like whole thing is like, he is like super gross with women like that. It's like, they're like, I was like, whoa, I did not. I watched this on Saturday morning. It was like 7. I literally watched this in kindergarten. I'm not even like, this came out in 88. Like, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I remember my friend's mom was like, you like the cartoon show, you can watch Beetlejuice, it's PG. And like, I did watch it a lot, and like, I wouldn't let a kid watch it. Like, now it's like, whoa. That's the shocking part. It's not that much like, everyone's woke or something. It's just like, I don't think we knew what this was for a long time. I think culturally we all just were like, Beetlejuice is cool, and didn't rewatch it. And then we did, and we're like, whoa, he is creepy. But it's also like, the interesting thing about this, and I want to bring this up, is I find it interesting sometimes when you watch a movie and everyone goes like, oh, well, he's gross and this movie's gross. Well, he's gross, but the whole movie is like, he's gross. Like, there's not a point in the movie they're like, this is acceptable. The movie's like, this sucks. I hate this guy. He's trying to marry a teenager. Like, we don't like him at all. Like, I find oftentimes people will be like, this movie's gross. The movie knows he's gross. Like, it's never presented that he's not. It's just that we all forgot he was gross. That's the problem. That's the issue here. Keaton does a great job. It's funny that this was considered, I mean, he was sort of already a star, but I think for most of my generation, we either knew him for this or Batman. But this is like, man, he is so charismatic. He is really not in it that much. But it is like, you know, I've heard other critics at the time brought up I always quote the Poochie thing, like when is Poochie going to be back on screen? But it does feel like that. You want to see him. But also it's like Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are like very beautiful and charismatic. You have everyone from like Jeffrey Jones, who I know his various issues, but Winona Ryder to Catherine O'Hara to Gary Shaddix to Robert Goulet and Dick Cavett, which is bizarre. Like, just an insanely fun cast to watch that it's just like, it's so watchable and so much style. It's like what brings this movie together, flaws and all, is its inherent charisma. You know, I think this film goes down for me a bit in this rewatch than I had thought of it previously. I think Burton's stronger when he has a bit of a structure. This is like a bizarre ass movie that it was this successful and this big. I find it to be kind of beautiful that this kind of thing could be as big and works as well as it does. I did like it, but I do think like its saggy around the edges feel of it does feel a bit like, you know, this barely got by. And all those films, you know, I brought up Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters. I think that is true, but they're like all more interested in the enjoyable. I think it's like when people talk about 80s cinema and all the corporations and all the evil and like how they're more interested in like hyping up the teenagers and being a pro audience and being the reverse of the 70s. There's obviously a negative to that, but I think you look at films like the three I keep mentioning and like Back to the Future and stuff, and it's like, but they're still like really enjoyable and fun. And as much as like this, you know, seeing Burton's design in this and his style is just like off the charts amazing. Like he really like came at this with a real original voice, and you can tell like the reason he's the auteur he is because of stuff like this, because people weren't used to it. Now it's just so you know, so many people have done it, we've seen so many movies, it doesn't feel surprising. But I remember when he didn't have that many movies and this felt like different and stuff. I wish he would go back to more things like this. I think this is really cool. I don't know if any filmmaker has the balls or any studio has the balls to do something like this, but at the time they did. I think there's probably a lesson into using your cast and your style and all of that to work to make an enjoyable experience. I think there's a lot of films in the 80s that are more experience-based than story-based. I think once you get into that experience, you're with it. This is maybe not as strong as I remember, and maybe part of it is being like, holy shit, that's what Beetlejuice is? I forgot about all this. But like everything from like Winona Ryder dancing to the end, to like the Deo thing, to like just thinking like Robert Goulet on the phone with an amazing background, like what the fuck is this? Like it's just like there's so much to fall in love with here. I feel like trying to explain Beetlejuice, or even trying to explain my experience, is one thing, but trying to explain this movie is a hard nut to crack. This is sort of like lightning in a bottle. I talk a lot about the alchemy of making movies. This was an alchemy. No one will get back all these people at the era that they were to make what this was, and I'm happy it happened. I think it does feel like a completely different kind of left turn sort of thing, but it does feel like the guy who made Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It feels like the guy who could have like Large Marge and the dinosaur thing and have a bunch of funny jokes and stuff. It feels like that guy, and I sort of love that about it. But I think I like Pee-wee's Big Adventure more. I think I like it when he has a bit more of a point. I don't know what the point of Beetlejuice is. I don't care in another way, but I think Burton works better when he has an actual finish line. And I guess the real finish line was to defeat Beetlejuice, and then everyone's happy or whatever, and that's cool. But I think like when you come back on some of these, you're just like, it was a fun movie and we had fun with it. And I think this was probably has a larger legacy than just like, that was a fun one. I think it has a large legacy. I think there's a lot style-wise that came from this movie, and its influence is probably greater than its quality. But the experience of watching this was definitely a surprising one. It definitely like caught me off guard and surprised me in a lot of ways that I didn't know Beetlejuice was that creepy. I didn't know, this and that, but it was like fun to experience and realize like, Tim Burton sort of used to have it, and that's all he sort of had to make it through, and he somehow fucking did it. And it made me believe in, like, this is why people thought this guy was great, because he was able to do this. And I think to do it in his own style, I think this was a lot better directed and had more of a director voice than those other films I sort of listed. He very much, this could not be made without Tim Burton. And if you read anything about what this could have been and all that stuff, this was Tim Burton through and through. And how this came, if this is his version of a slapdash together fun 80s movie, no one made a slapdash together fun 80s movie like Tim Burton. And I think regardless of what you think of it now and Johnny Depp and stupid hats and stuff, I think Michael Keaton acting crazy is a hell of a lot more fun to get through than that ever was. And it reminds me of a director running on his own artistic talent and a ton of great actors' charisma to make a hell of a good time. Maybe it's not as good as I remember, but it's still, kind of fun. So if you have seen Beetlejuice and would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.